Let's just kick it off by just mentioning a couple of things about me. So I'm Sasha Rosenbaum. I used to work for Microsoft for about 4 years, and now work for GitHub. So sometimes I say we about Microsoft, sometimes I say we about GitHub. It just happens. I used to be a developer. I did ops and DevOps for a number of years, and then I've been doing architecture and program management, product management. So basically, I transitioned from jobs where I was mostly writing code to jobs where I mostly talk to people. So it's kind of an interesting transition over the course of my career. In my spare time, actually, I organize conferences. So DevOps Day Chicago is where this picture is from. I actually have been a part of DevOps Day's community for 7 years, I think now. You know, you can ask me questions about DevOps as well if you'd like. So Brian mentioned that we're seeing this massive transformation happening in the industry, and that software teams need to evolve to keep pace with it. So I just kind of want to learn a little bit more about you. So my first question is, have you used GitHub before? And so I am going to see if I can see the chat over here. So, okay, just tell me yes, no in the chat if you don't mind. That would be cool. All right, so a couple no's, mostly yes. All right. Now, tell me if you have used GitHub Enterprise before. All right, so I think I'm seeing more no's. Okay. And I know that some folks are not even aware that we have GitHub Enterprise offerings, so we're going to talk about this today. And then last question, it's a little bit of a trick question, but do you use open source in your company? All right, cool. That's mostly yeses. Depending on you know, the audience, a lot of times I will get a no to that question. So like, okay, no, we don't use open source in our company. We're all closed source. But it's really not what we see. So if we look at software composition from different companies in the world, like we see that 99% of organizations make extensive use of open source, not just use like a lot of open source. And actually 90% of the code that you ship in your applications is actually coming from open source. So you may think that you don't use open source extensively, but actually you're only writing about 10% of your business logic, and everything else is coming from open source. And in general, we sort of see a lot of evolution kind of in the world of best practices. So like all of these companies, we like talk about like they're shipping faster, they're iterating faster, they're focusing on innovation instead of maintenance. They're pushing code more confidently, right? So that's another thing that comes from shipping faster, right? You need to be able to push code to production with confidence, because if you don't know the quality of your code, you can't ship faster. They leverage a lot of open source, and they focus on only the business logic that matters. They collaborate through inner source, and then they measure the team metrics, and they optimize for the right metrics, which is a whole, you know, you can build a whole presentation about that in particular. But like, how do you get there, right? Again, we look at the charts from the industry, and we see that from 2008 to 2018, like we have days in between updates to customers go from almost 6 months to just 20 days. And that's like an average of the industry. But if you are talking about high performers, they ship multiple times a day, right? Microsoft ships multiple times a day. GitHub does, like Google obviously does. So all of these companies are shipping all the time. And it used to be that, like, if you were in a different business, you could say, oh, you know, I'm not in the software business, so I don't need to be like this really good about shipping software. But now, realistically, if you're not really good at shipping software, then you're probably getting disrupted by someone who is really good at shipping software. So what we see, in addition to this data from high performers, we also see a lot of companies struggle with very common challenges. So one is insufficient supply of developers. Nobody has enough developers. It's like one of the coveted resources today. The other thing is the 99% of code based on open source, like we mentioned, but we don't know how to do security for that open source code, right? This is something new that people don't really know how to consume. And then companies are struggling to adopt DevOps. Everybody's talking about DevOps. DevOps actually was coined as a term 10 years ago. We just celebrated the 10-year anniversary, but 93% of implementations are not DevOps optimized across the industry, right? So we have lots and lots of challenges. So how do we solve all of these problems? Of course, you can guess from my t-shirt and my hoodie that my answer to that is going to be that we're going to solve all these problems with GitHub. So we are the largest developer platform on Earth. These numbers are actually not the latest, but I can't discuss the super latest numbers yet. Maybe we'll get some more of that at Satellite, which is next week, which you should all attend. It's now completely free to attend, so you can watch wonderful presentation and Nat's keynote and all of the stuff about the new things coming out. So we've got, more than 40 million developers on GitHub, unique developers contributing code to public and private repos. We have more than 1 billion contributions a year. We have 3 million organizations, and 50% of Fortune 500 companies are using GitHub also. And so we've got the most innovative companies using GitHub. We got leading global enterprises using GitHub. We had the top open source projects. So this is one of the things that is very interesting, right? Kubeflow or TensorFlow or Kubernetes or NPM or Elasticsearch, they're all developed on GitHub as a platform, right? So we know that most of the open source software in the world comes actually from GitHub, is based on GitHub as a platform, right? And then we've got the largest DevOps ecosystem. We integrate with pretty much everybody in the world in terms of DevOps integrations. So, there was a question about Jira. Obviously, Azure DevOps integrates with Jira as well. But like GitHub by design integrates with pretty much everybody out there. And then GitHub can be your partner in your digital transformation, which again, everybody's going through and everybody's struggling with. So we focus on a number of things. One is security and compliance, so kind of bringing that DevSecOps, focusing on security, on advanced security, and I'm going to talk a lot more about that throughout the development process. We focus on code to cloud, so sort of CI/CD of the deployments, team collaboration in a way that's really not possible with other platforms. This kind of came out of the mindset of open source. And then making it easier for you to attract developer talent. Like we said, that was one of the challenges for big organizations right now. And sort of having the enterprise foundation platform for all of this. So if we double click on security, I think it's a Microsoft expression, double click, I don't know. But anyway, so we can see that we can ensure security and compliance of the open source components. We can shift security left, and we can bring the expertise of the top security researchers from that community into your projects. So again, let's focus on each of these specifically. So in modern software supply chains, as we said, 80-90% of the code comes from open source. But this means that this is a tiny graph, like your typical application, whether it's .NET or it's Node or any other language, it's probably based on a ton of open source packages, right? So this is just a tiny graph. It could be much larger than that. Like famously, when you do npm install, it usually brings in thousands of packages. That can be very heavy. In general, there's a lot of sources that your software comes from, which means that someone somewhere in the world could have pushed a change into a package that you don't even know about. Notice how this came from actually somewhere down the pipeline. You don't even know that you're consuming this package in the first place, right, in your application. But now you might have a security vulnerability that is tracing you all the way back from some dependency somewhere in your code. And so the first challenge here is to even know that this happened, right? The second thing is to try to remediate this. And we see that this takes a lot of time for projects to remediate even known security vulnerabilities. So if we, for instance, an Equifax hack is an example of that. So it was a vulnerability that was released on a certain date. 2 months later, Equifax still did not remediate that vulnerability. There were hackers that were actively searching for everybody who was leveraging, like who was using this code, and they hacked into the Equifax database by just leveraging that vulnerability. So technically, if Equifax had paid attention to alerts and remediated, actually had the alerts set up and then paid attention to them and remediated, none of this would have happened. The top executives wouldn't have to go to jail, and my information wouldn't have to be in some hacker's hand, which apparently it was. So if we're talking about the cost of security breach, the cost is actually in millions. It's incredible how expensive this is. And it's also incredible how often this happens. This happens to companies all of the time. A lot of times it's hashed, so we don't know about it. A lot of times it's on the media, so we learn about that. But it's literally, I've read the case studies about the Sony hack and about some other popular known ones, and it's just incredible the level of devastation that was inflicted on the company and how much it took to just bring it all back. But then if we discovered it before the breach, it would cost us significantly less. And then if you look at this graph, if you go all the way down to development and you discover the vulnerability during development, it literally costs you almost nothing to remediate it, right? So we went from $80 to millions. And that depends on how far right the security is actually getting discovered, right? But then we want to shift security left. This is so if you go to any DevSecOps presentation, you will see that we're trying to shift security left. But the question is, how do we actually do that? Because if we talk about how many security researchers per developer we have in the industry, the number is actually dismal. Microsoft has a lot higher number than the average in the industry, and I don't remember what exactly it is, but the point is, on average, you will have hundreds of developers per single security researcher, and security is always an afterthought, right? So people always this probably is okay, we don't have to. It's we built the house, we brought all the furniture in, we put on the expensive TV and everything, but we didn't install the locks on the door because, well, maybe the burglars won't break in, so it will be fine, right? That's kind of the way our industry thinks about security oftentimes. So what we have actually in GitHub is 3 different components that, and maybe some other things that are going to get released shortly, but we have dependency insights. So remember that tree where you had security vulnerability that you didn't even know existed? We have the dependency insights that can actually alert you to that. And you don't need a third-party tool for this. It's integrated with GitHub repos, so you don't need to worry about it at all, right? And then you can actually have vulnerability management as well. So we have acquired a tool last year that allows you to auto-remediate vulnerabilities. So it will introduce a PR. So a lot of times the vulnerabilities are fixed by the package itself, right? So if you upgrade from version 2.3 to 2.4, the security vulnerability will be remediated, right? So we have now vulnerability management that will introduce a pull request to you that will suggest that upgrade to your repository, right? So you can actually, literally, all you need to do is test your, automated tests and merge that PR, and your security vulnerability has been remediated. So we have seen that for people who are using this, the time to remediate security vulnerabilities actually went down by a lot. So if we're talking about usually in open source projects, a lot of times it takes them 100 days to just even remediate a security vulnerability after it becomes known. With people using our tools, it actually went down to just a few days. And then we have something called ColdQL, which allows you to build custom query-based analysis. So you can take the intelligence of the security community and you can basically run it on your own repos and discover similar vulnerabilities. So once something gets discovered, you can identify code that kind of looks like that and fix it as well. So we have like a testimonial from Twilio that basically switching over to GitHub made security vulnerabilities just so much easier to fix. And then we also have something that's automated code scanning. Sorry, I need a glass. I need to drink a little bit of water. I'm definitely talking on high speed here. So basically, we can find vulnerabilities faster. We can base our research on a community of experts, and we can also integrate that into developer workflow. So instead of like having a pen test analysis all the way on the right before it goes to production, and paying some, security consulting a lot of money for that, we can actually integrate all the way to the left of our process and kind of have that taken care of much faster. So the other thing that Brian kind of alluded to is we also do automating the code development lifecycle. So we have basically actions and packages. Packages is relatively new, so we introduced it relatively recently, and also just, I guess, a month ago, we acquired NPM. So NPM is now part of the GitHub family, so that's kind of cool as well. So Actions is the tool that allows you to do CI/CD on GitHub, and just like Azure DevOps, you can host your agents on Windows, Linux, and Mac. So whatever your tools, you can run it on Actions, which is very cool. Especially, I see a lot of sort of iOS developers being very, very happy that they can get Mac build agents, because usually it's a whole big problem. But basically, you run the actions, you can run them on your own agents, or you can run them on hosted agents, in which case they are built based on GitHub. So they're in the cloud and they will run your build and deployments for you. Now, actions are completely open source. So you kind of build your own actions, you submit them to Marketplace, and then they become part of the community. So even more extensible. So in Azure DevOps, you can also contribute extensions and tasks into Azure DevOps pipelines. But actions is even taking it to the next level, where the actions are really built by the community, also by us, right? But it kind of allows you to take advantage of, just in the open source mindset, take advantage of the same actions built by anybody in the world, right? So, someone from Kubernetes can build an action that you can tomorrow leverage to deploy your own Kubernetes clusters, which is pretty cool. And then you can also basically have, sorry, I'm blanking on where I was going with this. So I'm going to go to the next slide. So basically, this whole life cycle, and here the circle is a little bit extended, but basically you can plan, code, build, test, release, deploy, operate, and monitor your software, right? So all of your application development life cycle on GitHub. And then you can, again, host this in the cloud, so you can run it on GitHub hosted agents. You can also host it on-prem. So if you have GitHub Enterprise server on-prem, for instance, you can also host your development on-prem. And then you can, obviously, we're cloud agnostic, but we're also highly integrated with Azure for obvious reasons. So you kind of get the best of both worlds here with GitHub automation. So I'm just going to quickly go through the CI/CD. Again, I wish I had a demo, but unfortunately my time to prep for this was limited. So you can kind of go and play with the GitHub Learning Lab and build your own action pretty quickly. So we have, I think I looked up a number from a couple of days ago. We deployed this month, there was 260,000 actions deploying to Azure. So that kind of gives you and actions have been live for, I think, about a year, maybe, starting from beta. So it kind of gives you the idea of how fast this ramped up. So you can also build it in your own language, in your own environment. So whatever operating system and whatever language you're using. And the other thing is that is very cool about actions is they're not tied specifically into CI/CD. So you can actually tie an action to any trigger that you want. So you can automate actions. Like, I don't know, if you want to post to Twitter with actions, then you can do that. It's kind of like your Azure function, right? You can automate any kind of procedure with actions, which makes them very flexible in terms of what you can do with them. But again, we see lots and lots of usage specifically for continuous integration. And then also we get the end-to-end traceability and governance. So you can link Azure boards into GitHub Actions. And so you can have your work planned and then go with the flow all the way from the GitHub repo into the work planning, into deploying into production, kind of link it all together. You can have the best practices integrated across different repos. And then this is another thing that sometimes people are not aware of. GitHub offers integration with Azure AD, so you can bring your own authentication into GitHub, so you don't have to use the GitHub identities. You can fully integrate with your enterprise Active Directory and just leverage GitHub with that. Okay. So this is actually pretty cool. So Pinterest moved, I actually don't know where from, but they moved to GitHub Actions for CI/CD, and they reduced their build time by 8x, so from 80 minutes to 10 minutes on average. So that's pretty incredible to be able to reduce your build time so significantly. So it kind of speeds up their entire pipeline. And so they can get that feedback in terms of fast iteration so much quicker. All right. So we can also talk about increasing the team collaboration. So again, open source mindset is very different than what we're used to in terms of closed source, and everything's behind the firewall, and even teams inside of enterprise don't talk to each other, right? Everybody's like shipping their own thing and worrying only about their own stuff. Well, we have the experience in doing social coding. So again, millions of developers developing on GitHub and developing some of the largest open source projects. We can work across organizations. So kind of inside your firewall, we enable, this is called inner source. So basically when companies embrace inner source, they see a lot of uptick in terms of speed of development across teams. So what we have in terms of collaboration is basically we have like enterprise core, so everything that you need for project management, so version control and project management, wikis, documentation, all that stuff. Then we have inner source, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more, and then we have GitHub Mobile, which is cool because I know in Azure DevOps, we've been asked a lot if we're going to have a mobile app for that, and we do have that on the GitHub side. And then we have Insights, which is getting visibility into metrics on your teamwork. So, so for inner source is a testimonial from Nationwide. So they saw a 90% reduction in merge times from 3-day turnaround, dropped a 3-day turnaround to access repos, and went, okay, I'm just reading from the slide. Anyway, they went from Subversion to GitHub, right? And they also allowed their teams to collaborate. So when I say inner source, it's like open source inside your enterprise firewall, quote unquote, right? So if I have multiple teams, right, and for instance, I'm shipping a feature and I'm dependent on another feature that is delivered by another service. Let's say I need another API call from a database, right? And then I'm going to that team and I'm like, hey, I'd really like you to add X, Y, and Z API call because it will unblock me to be able to ship something. But then that team may put it on their backlog and that may not be a super priority to them. So maybe I am just like not able to move forward because they have that hard dependency, right? With inner source, what it allows me to do is that I can myself go and browse their source. So their source is open source to me, not to the outside world, right? But inside their enterprise, I have access to their source, right? And then I can read their development guidelines and I can submit my own changes. So maybe that API call was just a few lines of code, and if it passes their testing, they can merge my PR. And here I enabled myself to deliver a feature that was unblocking me. And that, in this sense, we see, especially for teams that are distributed teams that have a lot of microservices that are based across delivered by different teams, we see that it really helps teams collaborate and speeds up the shipping of the software. So basically, and there's, I don't have it here, but there's a bunch of different testimonials, including the Microsoft itself, in terms of the ability to accomplish stuff since companies started adopting inner source in terms of shipping software. And then in terms of just team collaborations, this allows you to break silos, and sort of open sourcing the code internally gives you a lot more visibility into what other folks are working on, and also gives you the ability to help each other, right? It's the same argument that we generally have for open source. Hey, when we open source .NET, right, we saw the worldwide community contributing to .NET, right, as opposed to Microsoft. And Microsoft hires very smart people, but still, every now and again, we would get a contribution that we would never expect from, I don't know, a physicist from Africa who is able to speed up our .NET Core by like a millisecond, right? And that's pretty cool, right? Because we're leveraging the entire open source worldwide community. But the same is available in terms of inside your enterprise while leveraging inner source. Like I said, there's GitHub Mobile. It's super popular. It was released relatively recently and people love it. So you can go and try it out if you have your personal projects or your enterprise. You can try out the GitHub Mobile. And then inside, so Brian briefly mentioned Dora, the DevOps Enterprise. Nope, I cannot disambiguate this right now. But so Dora was purchased by Google, but the lead researcher from Dora actually recently came to GitHub. So Nicole Forsgren joined the GitHub team a few weeks ago. So basically, she is one of the people who's going to lead the effort to deliver insights to our customers. So basically, we are allowing you to see the metrics on the development and trying to look into the most meaningful metrics for how you can measure your work. So for instance, like we don't recommend that you measure your team velocity because it's a metric that's easy to game. And usually you don't see something, you see like decrease in effectiveness and not increase when you start focusing very much on team velocity, right? But then there's some metrics that are very, very insightful in terms of how your team is doing. So we're going to take this very mindful approach of looking at which metrics are actually predictive of performance, and then trying to make it available to customers. And some of it is already in GitHub, so you can obviously leverage it today. And then again, I mentioned a few times that there's a growing developer shortage. So in terms of GitHub, we have lots and lots of, actually the industry size is estimated roughly at the GitHub user size. So basically we kind of assume, not just GitHub, but like the industry kind of assumes that every developer has played with GitHub at least a little bit. And then GitHub is very strong in education. So basically we have 2 million students on GitHub education package. So we do see that lots and lots of developers already know and love GitHub. So it kind of makes it easier for you to onboard new people, and it makes it easier for you to basically scout new talent, right? If you leverage GitHub. So basically you can get connected, stay connected. If you open source your projects, that's another way to maybe recruit people who contribute to your projects, but that's a whole other conversation. And then, so basically we have GitHub Engineering direct support. I just wanted to mention this. So enterprise facing, we have direct support engineers, and then you can get also personal touch. So kind of you get in touch with the same person every time. So all of this, this is my sales pitch. All of this is part of an offer called GitHub One. So GitHub Enterprise, Actions, Advanced Security Packages, the GitHub Learning Lab, which you can customize for your enterprise. So you can customize which learning paths people can take on your internal developer tools. And then engineering direct support and insights. So all of this is part of a new offer. It literally was announced, I don't know, a month ago maybe. So it's called GitHub One. It's like GitHub Enterprise on steroids. So you can leverage this now. It's also available to purchase through Microsoft EA. So, and I think until June 1st or June 30th, there's a major discount price. So I'm not going to speak to the price, but it's a pretty cool thing to check out right now. Okay. So with that, thank you very much. You can find me at DivineOps on Twitter and on GitHub. It's the same name. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.